welcome to this Career Conversations panel. Today we are talking about careers in project management and consulting. My name is Liz Cook and I'm the Employer and Alumni Liaison at the Career Center, which is just upstairs at 202 McLaughlin if you haven't been. This event is part of a series that includes the Industry Insights panels as well as Career Conversations panels, so both of which are sponsored by the Alumni Relations Office, so we'd like to thank them very much for their generous support. And I'd also like to thank the Center for Student Success and Diane and Sadiki in the back for partnering with us on this. So if you'd like any information on any of our other events, we've got a Career Center booklet in the back that you're welcome to take a copy of when you go. This is the last of our in-person Career Conversations panels for the year. We have one more career conversation that's happening by webinar, and that's going to be on April 15th with writer and curator Ingrid Chu. She'll be joining us from New York City and talking about her career as an artist and curator, so you can register for that online. And the Career Center is also going to continue to be offering workshops throughout the summer, so please continue to come visit us throughout the summer months. Just a few reminders before we begin. If you have a cell phone, just put it on silent so it doesn't interrupt. If you haven't already done so before you leave, just make sure that you sign in at the back. There's a sign-in sheet back there. And if you do need to leave at any time during the session, that's okay. Just try and leave quietly without slamming the door behind you or something like that. And if you're interested in learning any more about the many services and events that the Career Center offers, you're welcome to talk to me after today's session as well. So the purpose of today's panel is to provide you with inspiration. We hope that hearing the career stories of these professionals will help you along your own career journey. We also hope it'll provide you with insight and advice so you can learn about what it's really like to work in these areas and how to get your own career started. And this is also to provide you with an opportunity to connect and network with professionals who are working in fields of interest to you. So the format of today's panel will have approximately an hour of discussion to begin. So I'll start us off with a few questions and then I'll focus on questions from the floor. So start thinking as you're listening to our panelists of what questions you're going to be asking. And after the formal question and answer period, there'll be a more informal mix and mingle portion where you'll be able to speak face to face with our panelists. And we'll end today's panel promptly at 4 o'clock, so that's when we need to be out of the room today. So without further delay, I'll introduce our panelists. So right next to me we have Jamil Jivani, and he is a York alumnus, and he is with Innovation Expedition. I'll give each of you a chance to introduce yourselves after this as well. Next to him is Lisa Madokoro, who's with Ecentricarts Incorporated, and she's a York alumna. And Brian Smith is next to her, and he's vice president at Cirrus Consulting Group. And Brian is currently studying at York. And next to Brian, we have Graham Sue. Graham is assistant director of admissions and recruitment at the Schulich School of Business. And next to Graham, we have Carole Umana, who's a higher education consultant. So thank you all very much for being here. And now I'm going to ask each of you, I'll give you a chance to introduce yourselves because I'm sure you've got more that you can share. So I'm going to ask each of you to introduce yourselves and briefly tell us a little bit about your current role or currently what you do, what you have in your portfolio, if it's not as simple as describing a role. So kind of things like what your key responsibilities are within your current organization or the organizations that you are consulting for. Why don't we start with Carole and move this way?
Alrighty. So I do a lot of consulting in higher education. My graduate degree is in higher education theory and policy studies. And I worked in universities for a long time, actually at York for about 12 years, and U of T and Seneca, and I've done stuff at U of Waterloo and other places as well. And so primarily what I do is anything that an institution has a problem with or wants to do some research on. So I've worked for example, for U of T in terms of looking at different programs that they may be wanting to do, but they want to have some research first. Is this something that our institution wants to do? Who does it well? What are some of the pitfalls? What are some of the benefits that we could be doing? So I'm doing that currently with U of T and also at York. looking at anything from strategic planning, communications, standard operating procedures. Pretty well, if an institution has an idea or wants to do some research, they'll call me and I will create a report, or I will create procedures, or I will create communications, whatever it is that they need. So that's basically what I do. And right now, as I said, I'm doing a contract here with nursing for 2 more months, and then doing something with Career Center over at U of T, and then hopefully taking a couple of months off. That's one of the benefits of being a consultant.
Sure. So again, my name is Graham Sue. I'm currently with the Schulich School of Business in their Admissions and Recruitment Department. My career started off very different to where I am right now, actually. I started off as an engineer, actually. I was an automotive engineer, graduating with a mechanical engineering degree. I worked for 4 years in the automotive industry, 3 of them being in General Motors. If anyone here drives a Chevy Impala, that was kind of the car that I was working on. Those were my doors. I was the door guy, the door engineer, which I'm very proud of. I found that career wasn't really for me, so I wanted to change. How did I make the change? I did my MBA at Schulich, actually, which I made a very big transition. It basically led me to roles in the project management group at CIBC Technology. It took me into the marketing analytics department of BMW Canada. It allowed me to start up my own business, which I was working on for the previous 4 years in fashion and apparel, of all things. And then it ended up basically landing me a role in the admissions department right back where I did my MBA at Schulich. So what do I do at Schulich right now? Well, I help recruit students for them. We try and attract top candidates for the graduate programs. Not only do we recruit both domestically and internationally. So that's one of the perks that I guess you could say as part of my job, is I get to go to different countries and try and recruit top international candidates. At the same token, I also review the files. So I do take a look. If any of you were to decide to apply to a graduate program at Schulich, chances are I might be looking at your application, reading those essays that you're writing, looking at all your references, your transcripts, of course. So make sure everyone tries to get good grades while you're here at York. With all of that, then we just basically try and get people into our program and to try and help all the students succeed. Because at the end of the day, we succeed if you guys succeed. Basically, that's me in a nutshell. Okay,
thank you. Brian?
Hi, my name's Brian Smith. I'm currently a student in York, first year in history. I'm also semi-retired, and I'm working at Cirrus Consulting Group. We consult to doctors and dentists across North America and England, primarily in real estate matters and transitions. Before I worked at Cirrus, I worked for a company called Snowcap Investments, which were consultants to retailers across North America. And we did acquisitions, dispositions, expansion programs, things like that. Before that, I worked in retail for Le Chateau, which is a chain, and Reitman's, which is a chain. And I did store operations, and then I got into real estate. On my background, I went to McGill a long time ago, got a BA in history, and then I worked for 2 years in retail. Then I went to University of Chicago for an MBA in marketing, not finance. And basically, my work involves, at this stage, semi-retired, I supervise the people in our office on difficult cases. Before that, I handled the difficult cases, and I recruited dentists and doctors across North America and England to be clients. I'm glad to be here to discuss what I did.
Hi everyone, Lisa Madokoro. I'm a project manager at a company called ecentricarts. Ecentricarts is probably a mid-size, I'd refer to it as a mid-size boutique web studio. So what that means is we build websites and interactive campaigns for a variety of clients, ranging from larger corporations, smaller not-for-profits, a lot of things in the arts and cultural sector. So my day-to-day responsibilities include, I manage about 6 projects at a time. They range from small to larger projects, so anything from 3 months to over a year. Within those projects, I also manage a team of developers and designers. And then a large part of my job is also obviously interacting with the clients. Involves usually daily status calls, budget reporting, and a lot of internal planning, strategy development, content planning, things like that. And making just sure the project runs smoothly from start to finish. I got my Master's of English Lit at York, and before that I did an undergrad degree at Western, also in English Lit. And I had a couple jobs after school that were also in more of the technology web sector before I ended up at ecentricarts.
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. So I graduated from York in 2010 and then went to law school, and have been back in Toronto since June of last year, and have been working for the company Innovation Expedition since then, or since August. The company focuses, as the name would suggest, on providing consulting services to businesses and charities that are either trying to expand into areas they don't already work in, or to try new types of projects, hence innovation. So to give you an example of the way I fit in my particular role is as a project associate. So projects that are ordinarily initiated by people more senior to me in the company, I kind of work with them to develop, to use our tools and develop kind of a strategy of how we'll support that client. Give you a couple of examples of the kinds of work that I've done. So in the fall, most of my time went to supporting an environmental markets fund that was looking for angel investors as they try to expand from being kind of like a personal investor fund to something larger. So that meant coming up with marketing strategies, presentations for potential investors, and kind of build a narrative around the investing strategies of the fund. And then right now, the bulk of my work is working with a company called the Charity Impact Foundation, which is Vancouver-based and offers fundraising technologies online and also strategic philanthropy initiatives. So the biggest thing we work on right now is Bell's Let's Talk mental health campaign that you probably saw some stuff around, and we are working with Bell's corporate social responsibility team to develop projects that would fundraise for local mental health initiatives in the cities that Clara Hughes is visiting. So that's kind of, I guess, my current job in a nutshell.
Great, thank you. Thank you all for sharing that. And I know some of you started to go in a little bit to your work history, which is great. But my next, so you've touched upon a little bit of what I'm going to ask next. So my next question is, I'd like each of you to share a brief overview of your career story by telling us a little bit about how you became interested in what you're doing right now. You can talk about your education as well and how that has helped you out in finding what your current career is. So how you got to where you are today. Would you like to start, Jamil?
Yeah, sure. So I graduated from here in 2010 after transferring from Humber College, and basically in fall 2010 I started law school at Yale University, which I was there until May 2013. And as you might know, when you do your law degree outside of Canada, they ask you to write what they call National Committee on Accreditation exams, which is a horrible, horrible bureaucracy. And so I have to write 6 exams before they will allow me to article. So I don't start articling until August of 2014 of this year. So I had basically a gap year in between law school and starting at the law firm. And most people coming from my law school, when they have that type of gap year, will clerk for a judge, which I didn't really want to do for a number of reasons, and instead I wanted to get some business experience. And consulting offered kind of like, you know, the ability to get some like high level experience in a short amount of time, especially with a relatively small firm like the one that I work with. So that was kind of where my interest in this particular role came from. And the other thing that I really liked about consulting, which to contrast it to law, is the client interaction you get. So I'm on the phone with clients every day and have very regular contact with clients. At the corporate law firm I start with in August, my client interaction will be minimal, and for a few years, as most law firms are, it takes a few years before you get that kind of client interaction. So it was a really nice opportunity to kind of learn how to build those relationships and manage those relationships, and to start to think about how to monetize my skills and services. When you're just a student, sometimes it's kind of weird to think that some of the skills you're already building and the things you know how to do, someone's going to actually pay you to do those things for them one day. And that was kind of like a weird thing for me to get used to. So, and consulting's like kind of forces you to really get comfortable with monetizing your abilities very quickly. So yeah, there were some things that I wanted to learn that I think consulting uniquely offered me, and it's been a great kind of flexible job to have in the interim while I have to take some time away from work to write these exams. So.
Okay, it's funny that you mentioned, Jamil, about sort of the skills that you have as a student that you don't realize you have that are valuable to employers sometimes. So with a background in English Lit, I think I acquired a lot of soft skills, but there weren't a lot of hard skills that I knew how to sell tangibly to employers. So the summer between my undergrad and starting at York for my master's, I just really wanted to live downtown Toronto. So I applied to a job at a software development company. They made electronic voting software, mainly within the States, and their software's rolling out a bit more in Canada. But I applied for a job as a quality assurance analyst. I wasn't even really sure what that was, but really it entailed sitting in a room for the summer and testing the software to making sure that there weren't any bugs. And when I went to the interview, I thought, I wasn't going to get the job because I wasn't a technical person. I didn't go to school for computer science or anything like that. But what really struck in that interview was my communication skills, which is an important soft skill I got through my English degree. From there, I was able to sort of position myself in a way at that company where I could get a technical writing job once I finished my master's at York, because I was still kind of unsure about what I really wanted to do. From that position, they promoted me to product manager of an accessible voting machine. So with that, I got to travel a lot around the States, conduct usability sessions, work a lot of elections in New York State. From that, actually, it's all about connections. So my manager at the time there moved on to Torstar Digital, and she sort of brought me with her, again, as a QA role. I knew it was something I didn't want to do long term, but getting my foot in the door there, I was able to advance to a project coordinator, junior project management role. And then from there, someone I knew at that company knew someone at ecentricarts, and they told me they were hiring a project manager, and from that, I made the jump over to ecentricarts. So it's funny how it all happened.
Okay, I graduated McGill in history 1969, and a liberal arts degree in the job market is like it is today, very hard to get a job. So I ended up working in retail. And what I did is basically supervise stores. And I supervised about 10 stores. And when you supervise a store, you have to hire the staff, fire the staff, make sure they work according to a plan, and basically promote sales. I did that for 2 years. In the last year, I started opening stores for the company. This was Reitman's, and that was the era of the shopping center expansion. So I got my first taste of project management. Each new store was a project. You'd have to go to Newfoundland, get into community, work with contractors, get staff, things like that. I really enjoyed that rather than doing the retail part of it. Anyways, after 2 years of that, I decided I needed more business experience, and I got accepted to University of Chicago, which was a great school. And it wasn't quantitative school, it was much more a hands-on school. We used to do consulting work from the university into various businesses. I worked at Continental Coffee, I worked in an ad agency, and you'd write reports, and this would be like a full-term project. And that was when I really got into consulting. Now, if I could have stayed in the United States, it would have been great because I had 3 job offers, but there was a thing called the Vietnam War going on then. And if you were a landed immigrant, even though you weren't a citizen, you were eligible for the draft. And they had what's called the lottery. So I had a low lottery number, which meant I was, first to be called. So I went back to Reitman's, and I did basically store openings for them across Canada. And then they opened a lot of stores. Chateau came to me and said, "You did such a great job. We want to open in the United States, and can you handle that?" Anyways, that was quite an experience. We opened all across the United States. It was generally a big failure, but it was very interesting work. And I got involved there with the real estate end of the business. Not only did I open the store, I would sign up the store with the American landlords. So anyways, after 2 years in Chateau, I was recruited by a consulting company called Snowcap Investments. which basically consulted to retailers about real estate. And I worked there for about 20 years. And we did clients, American clients coming to Canada. We got Marks and Spencer's out of Canada. We got, we did Blockbuster, we did Le Chateau, which was where I'd worked before. I got them as a client. And we did work all over North America and Canada. And it was a lot of travel, and it was very interesting. I loved working with the retailers. And basically, we were very successful. We sold a number of companies. We bought a number of companies for these companies, and it was very exciting. But about 10 years ago, I wanted a change, and I always was interested in the medical area. And I went to the owner of this company called Cirrus Consulting and said I'd like to work there because it would probably be my last full-time job. And what we do is we consult on transitions for dentists and doctors when they retire, and we do their real estate and change their leases. We also do billing for doctors on how to bill OHIP. So again, my job primarily was do the consulting, but mainly recruit the doctors. So we would give seminars all across Canada, the United States, and in England. And we would sign up doctors on a contract, and then we would do a plan for them. Now, as of last fall, I semi-retired. I only supervise people on projects, and I go to York as a full-time student. That's my background.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I consider my my career, I guess, path and where I am today is it's a series of you know, knowing what I don't like and knowing what I hated, pretty much. So it's like almost like a process of elimination, I guess, so to speak. And then kind of looking back and realizing that it all sort of makes sense. You know, I like to kind of attribute it to, not sure if you guys have ever listened to that Steve Jobs convocation speech to the Stanford engineering graduates, where he talks about connecting the dots and all that. You know, I kind of look back at my career, and you know, I kind of understand what he's talking about now when he made that comment. So again, I started off my career as you know, I graduated mechanical engineering. You know, straight out of my undergrad, I started my career as a project engineer in an automotive supplier. We made spoilers, actually, for cars. It was a company called ABC Group. You know, again, for many guys, this was like cool, really cool. I didn't really sort of like that job, didn't really like what I was doing. So I switched. I went to General Motors, where I was, again, design and execution engineer. I was working out in the Oshawa assembly plant, building cars for them. Did that for about 3 years, 3.5 years or so, and then realized I hate this job pretty much, right? Not that it wasn't a good job, by all means, it was a good job, and it's basically a dream job for someone who was really, you know, engineering sort of minded, someone who fit that role, but it just wasn't the right fit for me. So then I said, you know what, I can either stay at this job that I don't really like just because, you know, it's a good job, or I can actually do something about it, do something that maybe I might enjoy. The only problem was I didn't know what I wanted to do, right? Everyone would ask, well, okay, you don't like this job, so what do you want to do? Well, I don't know. I don't know what I want to do. So then I said, you know what, the best thing for me to do at that point would be to do an MBA, because I always knew that I liked seeing sort of the bigger picture of everything. I enjoyed thinking about how these companies were, you know, after you make the car, what happens to the car? I mean, you know, this company is only operating because they're actually selling these cars. They're making money. So, well, how does that aspect of the entire business work? And that's what really actually interested me. So I said, okay, let's go ahead and do an MBA. So I decided to enroll in the Schulich program. You know, I particularly liked the Schulich program because it gave me enough time to sort of, you know, figure myself out. And I thought, you know, when I was first starting the MBA, I thought I was going to go into finance because, you know, I came from engineering. Engineering, we were pretty good at numbers. We're comfortable with numbers. So, okay, finance, numbers, all sort of makes sense. That was in 2007. So 1 year later, 2008 came around, right, and basically shattered the dreams for a lot of people who wanted to go into investment banking. But luckily for me, you know, after taking a couple of finance courses, and then I did a summer internship, you know, at CIBC, one of the banks in there, again, I realized I don't like this. I don't like finance, actually. Again, it wasn't for me. So again, I eliminated that type of career. going into my second year of the MBA, I realized, you know what, I should really be doing, again, focusing on what really, you know, inspires me, what motivates me, what am I really interested in? And I found that I was really interested in marketing and strategic management consulting type of work. So I said, okay, let's go that route and see what happens. I had no idea where it was going to take me. Once I graduated, the first role that I got was at BMW Canada. I was in their marketing department, in their marketing analytics division, team, I guess you could call it. And so, you know, there was a natural connection there because, again, you know, I had automotive experience from before, but then now complementing it with the skill sets that I learned in the MBA, I was able to stay within the industry, but then transition to a new, different type of role that it was, you know, completely new to me. And I really enjoyed it, actually. It opened up a whole new side of the business for me. But at the same time, again, I had other aspirations. I've always really wanted to open up and start my own business. Again, this was the phase, you know, where I was going through, where it's just doing what I wanted to do, what I had a passion for. What I really wanted to do was start something on my own. Luckily, I found a couple other friends at Schulich as well who had the same type of interests as I did. So we said, you know what? What is it going to hurt? We start up a business and see what happens. We started up a business in men's apparel, actually, you know, to our surprise, it's still going on to this day. It's been about 5 years. It was our first shot at a business, and it's still operating. So I can say that, hey, you know what? Not bad. About a year ago, you know, I just happened to come across this role at Schulich, and I looked at it and I said, hey, you know what? I've never been in education before. I wonder if I would like it. So I threw my resume in. Lo and behold, they called me back for an interview and said, "Hey, come on in. Let's see, you know, let's see what you got." Well, then, you know, basically a year later, I see myself sitting here talking to all of you now, and I look back again, and you know, trying to connect everything. It all sort of made sense because the admissions and recruitment role that I'm in right now, it's admissions. It's trying to, you know, do the processes necessary to enroll students. But at the end of the day, it's a lot of marketing, right? You're trying to attract students to come and study at your school. You're promoting Schulich as a brand and as a school to, you know, the domestic market, the international market. So this is where the marketing aspects came in. You know, when I was at BMW, again, I had a lot, it was in marketing analytics. So it integrated basically my technical background, my interest and comfort with numbers, as well as my experience in the automotive industry. So again, everything just sort of made sense with regards to my transition. And then I find myself now sitting in a role that, you know, again, 10 years ago, I never really would have thought myself to have been even have the chance to be sitting in. But again, looking back, it all just sort of made sense.
I'd like to just touch on a couple of other things that I've heard as well, but I guess what I'll start to say is that when I graduated with my undergraduate degree at York, which was in Latin American Caribbean Studies, I had no plan. I've never had a career plan. There's a continuity. There's two things that are similar or that are two common themes in my life, and one has been passion, so being passionate about what I wanted to do, and then there's a continuity of always including education in that. So the doing, but also continuous education. So as I said, I graduated with Latin American Caribbean Studies and actually got a job in it. I worked in Central America for a long time in community development, working around communications, which led me into fundraising, which led me into major gift, big fundraising, which led me to the university. Along the theme of passion, wanting to help people, that was the constant theme through there, then went into student services and then student service management. So the theme that I've always had in my life is passion. I've always needed to feel very passionate about what I wanted to do. Something that you said that I think is really important, especially is when you're looking sort of at your career, is really understanding yourself. What are the things that you really like to do, and what are the things that you really don't like to do? So personally, corporate environment is not something I feel comfortable in. It's just not me. I feel much more comfortable in a higher education or a not-for-profit or community development kind of place. It's just who I am. So I've never personally gone after a corporate job because I knew I wouldn't fit. This is probably the most formal you're ever going to see me. Right? So it's just lifestyle, passion, knowing what I like, what I really can't accept, sort of what my likes and dislikes, and who I am as a person has been very, very important, I think. So again, I never had a plan. Still don't have a plan. I'm really enjoying what I'm doing now, working on those different variety of things, bringing the skills in. Anybody here have an idea of how many skills you have by the time you're an adult? Just call it a number. Anybody?
180.
180? Okay. Any other guesses? 7. How about 2,000? Right. I went back to school a couple of years ago and got my career counseling certifications, and one of the things they taught us is that as an adult, you have about 2,000 skills that you can draw upon, right? And this comes from your volunteer experience, from your schooling, from your professional experience, from anything that you could have done. So it can be anything from communications, writing, editing, computer, tons of things that you can draw upon. So if you can start thinking about what are those things that you have skills about, what are the things that you really like and the things that you really don't like, and the things that you're passionate about, it can really give you sort of an areas that you might want to research or start looking into as possible careers. So that's been my experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And it sounds like all of you have done a lot of looking back at your careers and making sense of it that way, connecting the dots, looking backwards.
Yeah.
But one thing I noticed was none of you mentioned wanting to get into project management or consulting from the get-go. It was something that you all kind of found your way into, but there wasn't necessarily a plan to get there. So it's interesting. I'd like to open up questions to the floor now. I'd invite you to stand up if you've got a question so that we can hear you. And just let us know if you're addressing one of the panelists or all of the panelists. Who has a question? Yeah, in the front.
Do you need me to stand up? I'm like, so specifically for Lisa and Jamil, Jamil, you have social proof, you went to Yale, and Lisa, you did, it was like sheer chance that you got into that as the first job. So my question for the both of you is, you didn't really have the skills of project management going in. How did you sell yourself? How were you able to, jump on board? And the reason that I ask is that, for example, my background is psychology and a certificate in business analysis, right? All the soft skills are there, like ready to go. However, the hard skills are not there. But I want to get in. How would you do that? How would you recommend to get in?
Okay. I think strategically looking back on it now, I found myself in smaller organizations to start with. So my role was not as defined. It was defined, I had a title, but there was room to wear a lot of different hats and sort of dip my toe in a lot of different roles. So I think essentially also what led to where I am now is, like you said, I had the soft skills, and as I was doing other roles in the industry, I realized as I watched other project managers that, hey, this is something I can totally do. So what was really key for me was aligning myself with those people as sort of mentors. Maybe the role wasn't so defined in the workplace, but just finding those people who had maybe 10, 15 years more experience than me, and a lot of them took me under their wings and really sort of let me shadow them. It wasn't even something that HR was aware of. It was just something that I sort of had to find for myself. And from that, they started giving me more responsibilities in that role. It also probably helped them alleviate their workload as well. And from there, actually, when I went to Eccentric Arts, it's funny because they actually let me know afterwards they hired me because of my first job as a quality assurance analyst, which I took because I didn't think, I just wanted to live downtown, if I'm being honest, right? So every experience I had in the industry from other facets at it also led me to more of a fuller understanding of what project management meant working in web and digital.
Yeah, so I always say that you probably could get a very limited sense of what I learned in school by looking at my transcript, because most of what I think I learned outside of the classroom. And I was really, really involved in extracurriculars and student clubs. So when I was at York, for example, I did one of those international internships that York International offers, which I would encourage you to apply to if you haven't. And so I went and taught at a high school in Kenya and created a corporate social responsibility program, basically giving internships to the graduates of the school that I taught at. And I managed that for a year, basically through my last year at York. I managed that from here into my first year of law school. And then I became the president of the Black Law Student Association at Yale, and I was I ran a constitutional law education program at Yale as well. So I had a lot of like management experience of like working with people and creating teams and developing projects and timelines. And so a lot of the skills I use in my current job, I actually did develop while I was, in school. What I don't know what the term you use was social proof. Is that okay? So yeah, like that helps, right? Like a big part of consulting, particularly consulting that is someone giving you trust to work in an area or for a company or in an industry you have no background in, is either you're working for a company that has that brand that they trust, or you might bring that, right? And certainly like having gone to law school and gone to Yale Law School helps a lot with that. So the quality of work that I get right now is better than I might get otherwise if I didn't go to law school, right? So I would say that like in this area of project management and consulting, your own credibility matters a lot, and building that in however way you can is really important.
And extracurriculars and clubs are a really great way to build experience and get the types of experience that you can't necessarily get in an entry-level position or a student-level job. So that's really great advice. It's a really great way to start building up those more advanced skills early on. And working at a small company too is a really great strategy, because you're right, the roles aren't always as defined, and you can branch out a little bit. It's great. Who else has a question? Yes, in the back.
Yeah. I have a question regarding how did you manage and keep record of stuff, like because I've been like project coordinator for the last 3 months, and we have been using Basecamp, an online tool. You might be aware of that. So what if like you forget something and you're managing more than 10 projects, and after a week, oh my God, there is a disaster coming in your way, and you say, oh my God, we gotta update our client on this. So how do you deal with this kind of situation? Because you can't check Basecamp at night or in the over the weekends.
Yeah, I think it's what's key is knowing what the critical issues are, sort of prioritizing the issues and what the blockers are. We also use Basecamp at Eccentric Arts. It's my favorite tool ever. And if people don't know, Basecamp's a project management tool. It's an online software. I have all my different projects on there. There's an overview calendar view, so you can log all key milestones and deliverables in there and get notifications when things are approaching. But like you said, there's so many things on the go at one time. It's hard to keep track of everything. So I think one is obviously knowing what the sort of the blockers are, making sure those critical paths are cleared so that your team can continue on with the work. 2 is having trust in your team. I think when I started Eccentric Arts, I sort of tried to do too much because I was new and everyone was new to me. But I've been there almost 2 years now, so it's really about managing a strong team underneath you and having people who I have tech leads on each project and a lead designer who are also aware of sort of things on their end and can raise things, and giving them the autonomy to raise concerns to me throughout the course of the project is really key, and having trust in that. And honestly, a small tip I do is I create a to-do list every day. I sort of have a running document. It's really old school, but I update it every day before I go home. I print it out. I highlight everything that I know needs to get done for the next day. So when I go in the morning, I just do a quick overview and sort of have my day lined up for me ahead of time.
There's one relevant question
Yeah.
to that. So being a user experience designer also, sometimes instead of like updating the team about the changes, sometimes I get into the changes myself, and it takes a lot of time, and my time screwed up, and I can't face the clients with this kind of situation. Because most of the IT companies here are outsourcing the work to developing countries, which is kind of like not a good stuff here. So in this kind of situation, have you ever taken the stuff yourself, or you always assign it and remind the teammates about this process?
Sometimes it has come to the point where I've had to take on a bit more because other team members are busier on other projects. But I think really what I've learned from those experiences is that decisions done in haste usually come back to bite you in the butt a little bit. Yeah. So trying to keep everyone on the project, all the critical members in the loop throughout the course, because usually when we get to the next phase of a project, if a decision was made without everyone knowing, we get to development and it's not possible, or scope is expanded, things like that. So I tried not to do that. I've learned my lesson. So it's just a matter, if you do have to do it, making sure you inform everyone of the changes you made. Yeah.
Does anyone else have anything they'd like to add to that answer? question.
For Rana, for doing a startup, right? How do you get your first clients into trusting you and to get your first customers? Because for many startups and entrepreneurs, getting that first clientele and first rush of money and establishing yourself and the reputation and trust, how do you do that exactly? So that, because I mean, out of all the people that you could get the services from, why you, right?
Right.
Why, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's a great question, and that's the question that every startup business faces, right? I think it basically just comes down to something that you just even touched on yourself is building the trust, right, in people. I think that when you're first starting out, you have to expect that you may be spending more, right, or adding more value, or basically working for free, essentially, right? Could be. I don't think that's something that you should rule out, because I think the fact of the matter is that that's how you build, right? I mean, if you look at people who are in the arts, people who have to build portfolios, all of that sort of stuff. Well, again, this is their way of building credentials, gaining trust in people, and proving to people what it is that you can actually do, right?
So as a follow-up to that, I just wanted to ask, did you do a lot of, or did the company do a lot of cold calling to get customers, or did you do it through like clients that you already knew?
So one thing is clients that we already knew. So this is just me specifically and personally speaking now. I mean, you start off with the people you already have relationships with, obviously, right? Because those are the people that you've already built a reputation with, and who already you have that sustained trust with. But of course that can only go so far, because once you exhaust your immediate circle, right? Well, what's the next step? The strategy that me and my other business partners that we used, it's identifying where the markets are and just kind of going after it. Sometimes, like for example, with us, you look at who's the biggest player in the market, right? They're attracting. They have their own kind of clientele. They've established a base somewhere. You know that there's a market there as well. So it's just a simple of looking at who's basically the lowest hanging fruit and going after it, right? Yes, I think building trust, getting yourself out there. I've spoken to many different entrepreneurs now, and they all say the same thing, that you might have the best product, but if nobody knows about it, nobody's going to buy from you, right? So building trust, getting yourself known, putting yourself out there, showing people what you can do and what you have to offer, how you're adding value to it, and then going after where there's a known market for it as well, right? I don't know if anyone else has anything else.
Carole, you've been nodding your head.
Well, because I'm in agreement everything you said. But maybe the other, and links into something that somebody else said, is sort of how do you get your first clients. Networking is really, really important. And you're networking now. I mean, you're networking with professors, you're networking in communities, you're networking with your friends and other colleagues. Probably y'all have a part-time job or something. Networking is so critically important for everything that you do, because you could be the biggest and the best and the most fantastic, but unless you are able to convey that and you're able to build those networks and build those relationships and be able to go back to those relationships and have those relationships talk about you, because that's what's really important. I can say I'm the best consultant in the world, and obviously I'm selling myself, but if somebody says you should contact her because she delivers, because she's on time, because she's good, that's what gets me the clients. So networking and thinking every contact with you that you have with everybody, you're selling yourself. You're leaving an impression in somebody, whether that's a prof or, as I said, a community leader, somebody where you're volunteering, or your boss or a school colleague. I have contracts from school colleagues that I did my master's with, and I'm now doing contracts with them. So it's just network, and always remember that the image that you're putting forth is an image that you're putting out in the world, and it could come back to either bite you, or it could come back to really be an advantage to you. So don't think, I don't have to be polite to that person because they're only, be polite, right? Be polite, be professional, be on time, just, you are the best brand. You're your brand, right?
Just in consulting, getting the clients is what pays the bills. And the best way to get clients, I've found, is referrals. If you do a good job for a client, that client will tell other people. And that's basically how we grew the retail business and the dental medical business. You took on your first clients, you gave them a very good deal, but you did very good work. You got a reference letter, you asked to use them as a reference, you did a video about them, then they would recommend someone else, you got another client. And that's the way it grows. You have to work very hard at building these relationships. And again, without clients, there's no business.
What was your first few mistakes going on to your first job, and how did you overcome it?
Your first few mistakes.
How many hours do you have?
Yeah, it's a tough question.
Should we start here and move this way?
Yeah, so I haven't probably been working long enough to make too many mistakes yet, but so I think being a student basically for my entire life since I was 5, it's very easy to be very self-contained in your work, and to kind of, you're responsible to yourself, your deadlines, but group work or teamwork is like a lot less common. Obviously, it depends on what you major in and stuff. I speak for myself and say it was very uncommon to do anything with a team. And as soon as I started working, I got a better, clearer sense of like the consequences of not keeping people informed of what you're doing, and how easy it is when you're working on a team, even if it's a loosely structured team where you're not all working on the same project, but you're working on projects that might interrelate with each other, that if you don't keep people informed, it's easy to have, you know, people going 2 different ways on something that we need to be parallel on, or you know, just kind of developing your own way of doing things that other people might not appreciate or might kind of see as a flaw. And I think that was probably the quickest thing that I made a mistake on and had to learn very quickly, of the importance of just, you know, keeping people informed of what I'm doing, and not feeling like I have the same self-contained autonomy that I had as a student to kind of do things my own way, in my own style. And yeah, so I would say that's probably where I made most of my mistakes so far.
Probably maybe taking myself a bit too seriously at the beginning. I think I put a lot of importance on what my first job out of school was going to be, and I think that sort of was a hindrance, so I took myself a bit too seriously there. And also, I think as a student, I was really into school, so I loved, you know, I would stay up really late working on essays. I put in a lot of extra effort, and at work that's really great too, but I think I took on too much as a result of that, when I burdened myself with a lot of really long hours that probably didn't need to be done, and just knowing when to flag things to my bosses when things didn't feel right, and trusting my gut there. And realizing I had a voice even though I might have been a more junior employee, but being able to speak that voice.
I'd say negativity in my first job. You get a university degree, you think you're pretty good, and you're supervising stores 6 days a week, across a district, and said, what am I doing this for? I could do much better. And it really, if it hadn't been for the opening to get into store openings, I would have quit, or they would have fired me. So generally, in a tough job market, you have to make the best of a bad job. Always looking ahead to get into a better job. But that negativity was very hard for the first 18 months that I stuck it out.
And you built up skills as you were doing it.
Yes.
For me, I think I would say it's not taking enough risk, actually, starting out. You know, I was sort of a very, very conservative person. Always liking to plan, you know, here's my 5-year plan, here's my 10-year plan, and, you know, everyone's sort of encouraged to have that plan, but the truth of in reality is that, you know, those plans can always change, and you never know what's going to happen the next day. You know, and that's why I think that, you know, not taking risks sort of early on can put a real delay in people's sort of overall career plan and progression sometimes. I think it's not a matter of, you know, just going and taking risks, but it's knowing how to manage the risks. That's what's really important. and mitigate those risks. So of course, you know, basically, you should definitely go out there and put yourself out there and try new things, you know, and because that's exactly how I learned, you know, what I like to do and what I didn't like to do. It's just by putting myself out there, taking myself out of the comfort zone and just trying and experiencing different things, but realizing that, hey, if things go, you know, for the worse, and if things turn out don't go as expected or as planned, you know, what's the worst case scenario that's going to happen, right? Obviously, I'm not saying go out there and risk your, you know, your house or your car or anything like that. But at the end of the day, if it doesn't go as planned, and the only thing that it cost you was a little bit of time, but at the end you learned a lot about yourself and what your true interests are, go ahead, go take that risk, take the plunge. I mean, a lot of people ask me, you know, when should I start a business? The truth of the matter is there's no right time to start a business, really. You just kind of have to do it, and eventually everything just kind of, you know, falls into place. You learn as you go. Yes, you will make mistakes, but that's part of the learning process. So just go out there.
That's a great question. I think for me it was letting other priorities guide my decisions. And those priorities would be, priority was salary. Money's important, right? We all need to live. But it's never been sort of my guiding light. But I have on occasion let it be. And it invariably didn't turn out right. Because the passion wasn't there. I didn't feel the passion or why I was doing this, and it's great to have that salary in the end of the month, but at the end of the month there's an emptiness. And so I think not being true to what my priorities were and letting myself be guided by that dollar in the end.
Yes, Scar.
Yeah, so my question is, how do you access like assistance with certain projects that quickly go above what you can deal with, or your expertise?
Instructing me, I guess.
The full panel? Okay, so how do you access assistance with a project that is beyond your own scope?
Yeah, it quickly becomes something bigger than what you can manage.
Okay.
Start.
Brian?
You got to get partners in your company to help you, because otherwise you'll take the fall. And it's a, you know, business, especially when you're working for other company or your own, it's cover your own ass. And if things get rough, and believe me, you see things get rough, you get lawyers get at you, you get all these things. You just have to know when to ask for help, whether it's within the company or outside people. You can't let the project fail, or you're gonna, or you can't, if it's gonna fail, you have to prepare people for it, because things do fail. I mean, I've worked on projects that were disasters and survived them by keeping everyone in the loop and explaining what the problem was and what the risks were. So you can't do it alone, and if you try carry it alone, you'll fall with it.
Anything else? And how do you find those outside people? Yes.
How? Well, it depends what the problem is.
Yes.
If it's a legal problem, you have to hire a lawyer who specializes in that, and, you know, fight back. And if it's a HR problem, you have to get someone who knows how to handle the HR problem. I mean, we've had, when I was in retail, we had so many unjust dismissal cases, we had to hire a lawyer just to handle that sort of thing. Because it was, you know, a growing company and lots of problems, and this is at Le Chateau. We expand the states, and we were hit with lawsuit after lawsuit. And the only way I couldn't handle a lawsuit in the United States.
Right. Okay. Oh,
wow.
In the salmon shirt, and then
All right, my first question will go to Brian. Yes, Brian. I graduated from York University in 2011 when I did political science after like my first 2 years of accounting, which I found I really hated. Because every time I was studying for an exam, I would see myself in the basement adding up numbers while my kids played upstairs. Right? I just hated that time. Right? My first question for you, originally being, all the stuff you've talked about today is very similar to what I'm encountering right now. So making the best of a bad job. You know, when you woke up back in those days and went to that job that you hated. Right now, regardless, I'm in retail. I don't want to be a manager. I I'm a team lead. I train. I lead the cell. I coach. I just don't like the corporate culture enough to want to be a part of the management team. So every day I get up and I go to that bad job and try to make the best out of it. So while you were there, you said it was either you got fired or you quit, right? So what came to your mind? What did you think about it? If you had the intention to quit, right? What would you have done? Because right now for me, starting in May, I'm taking a series of courses. You said it was hard to get it in the job market as a liberal arts graduate. I find that now. When I was in school, just like, I didn't really have a plan, right? I was gonna graduate, I was gonna go back to my home country, be a politician, and change the world, right? Doesn't really work like that. What were your thoughts in case you had gotten fired or you had quit the job? Because at some point last year, I almost went back to school for business and international economics. I'm good with business. It's just I don't like it enough to just go to the corporate office. I dread it. A lot of people dream about motivation and all that stuff. I dread it. I don't want to be a part of those fake conversations. I don't like those. So, what could have been the options for you? After talking to a few people, I talked to my older brother. He said, don't go back to school because you feel as though you can get a job, right? Go back to school to gain knowledge in the areas that you enjoy. I like business analysis, and I just like project management. The reason why I know, I'm going to stop very soon. The reason why I know that I like project management is because my second year at York University, I started a nonprofit organization. Right, so every year I go to my home country, review the school. Right, we fundraise here, review the school. I manage a team of 12 individuals. Right. My VP, for example, is an audit manager for Maximum Show. He's happy with his job, but I hear the things he goes through, and I'm like, I don't want that. But I work as a sales representative. But when I'm on that floor, when I'm managing that project back home, 15 hours could go by, and I'm still active. I wake up at 6 a.m., I go on the site, I'm talking to the carpenter, the bricklayer, the guy that's delivering the water, just talking to the kids, I'm talking to the teachers, what can we do in supporting the community to get the school to be better, right? 15 hours to go by from 6 a.m. to 7 p.m. I could be on site and I'll be happy. At my current job, you get me from 9:30 a.m. to 1:30 p.m. and it's painful. So I want to go back to school, certificate in business analysis. And then in September, I'll do the master's certificate in project management. The second question would be, is there any worth to these extra credits, these extra programs, because they're fairly expensive. So thinking I'm going to invest in them and just hoping that at some point somebody will believe you enough to give me a job, is it worth it?
Okay, to the first question, when you hate your job, it's a horrible feeling. The unfortunate part is you need the money. And that's always the issue, you know, to quit a job, you should always have another job. And I was looking. And the other thing is, in terms of firing, I realized, you know, because they were saying, you know, you're not, you know, they knew that I wasn't happy. And I came to them, you got to give me something else or I'm going to leave. And I was prepared to leave without another job. And I got the store opening job. But there's nothing worse than being stuck in something that you cannot stand going to. But unfortunately, sometimes you have to do that in order to keep going. So the best advice is take the best out of that job, try do your best in a lousy job, you know, and look for something else while you're there. Unless it's so intolerable, and I know people who have intolerable jobs where you have to quit. In terms of these other courses, they're always worth it. It builds a resume. It gives you more knowledge. It gives you more connections of other people taking it, professors who can help you get better jobs. And it's definitely worth it if it's related to what you like. So I'm a big proponent of education. When I was working, I got my broker's license. I got my stockbroker's license. I worked on my PMP, though I didn't get it. It's a very hard course. I always was taking English as a second language. I always believed in having more things in your resume to make you, number one, more eclectic in the world, more interesting, more things to talk about, and better to be recruited in the job market. Though by the time, you know, I was older, I had no problems because I was already experienced and people wanted me. But at an early age, if I had done it differently, I would have done more of that rather than just had a good time.
And there was another question in the gray sweatshirt.
It was similar to what he was asking. I was asking about there are a lot of courses available for project management, and I also been noticing a lot of post-grads in project management. So I just wanted to know if it's beneficial to go and do a post-grad in project management without much experience, or would it be more beneficial to, say, gain experience like Lisa did, and then maybe just land into a project?
Okay.
Can I just say something very relevant? My son also went to McGill. He took music, could not find work. He got a job at Accenture, but not in project management, basically clerical. But while he was there, he took his PMP. And he was working Accenture, so they accepted that as something to take his PMP. From that, he left Accenture, and he wanted to get a project management job. He couldn't get one in Toronto. He took the visa to go to London, and he got a job in London for Edelman, which in digital advertising, and he's been there 2 years, and it's fantastic. So the moral of the story is, it's worth getting the designations in what you want to do, because even if you can't get a job here, there are jobs elsewhere where there is a bigger demand. And now he's experienced. He's had 2 years of hard experience in doing this, and he's much better off.
What does the rest of the panel think about further education for project management, and if that should come before or after experience?
Yeah, I don't consider myself an authority on these matters at all, but I would say that it's really important to look at like who's done the program you're considering, and are they now in a position that you'd like to be in. I think like at York, we have historically had a bit of a disjointed connection between current students and alumni. At least I can say when I was a current student, I didn't really know any alumni, and I didn't really hear from any alumni, and these are the types of events that I think help correct that. But we pump out like 10,000 graduates from this university a year, and that's 10,000 case studies, right? And 10,000 people to look at and say, well, what did they do? And what are the programs they did, or what are the continuing education efforts that they made, and did that actually make the substantive difference in their career that I'd like to have in mind? And I think that's a really important place to start in this stuff, because theoretically you can come up with a lot of arguments that a lot of these programs would be beneficial, but there are people who can kind of give you the answer to that question. And I would strongly suggest speaking with them before making any decisions. When I faced I worked at a law firm in New York on Wall Street in the summer of 2012, and one of the partners there, when I was considering whether to stay or not, told me, don't believe you're so special that your life would be different from the people you see, right? So his point to me was, if I didn't want the life of the people who were working there, then I shouldn't think that if I worked there, my life would be any different. And that's kind of the advice I would give too, is like, if you see people who graduated from a program you're considering and their life is something you want, or their career is something you want, or the advantages of that program is something you want, then that's great. But start there and work backwards is kind of my advice. So.
Yeah, and just to add to what everyone's saying, I don't disagree that a PMP is a good idea. I don't have mine yet. I think number one, though, is sort of zeroing in on the industry you want to work in. So as I started working these jobs and working in technology, I knew eventually I wanted to end up in web and digital. So it's really immersing myself in that sort of project lifecycle of what that industry is like and gaining that experience. And then when I do my PMP, I'll have that to compare it to. I know people that do it the other way around, and I'm sure they have success, but I think bringing the own personal experience you can to that coursework will only benefit you. And if you can't get a job as, say, even a project coordinator in the industry you want to start with, even anything, like just immersing yourself in that world so you can see sort of how a project's run from start to finish in whatever industry. And I know, for example, in web and digital, a lot of people are moving more towards this thing called a Scrum Master certificate. It's not as intensive as a PMP, but it's more for agencies that are going a bit more agile. So I can talk about that more with you guys in detail if anyone has questions. But it's more of an intensive weekend course. But now actually recruiters on LinkedIn are looking for people with Scrum Master certification.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm working within the admissions department, so I'm definitely in favor of getting designations and degrees and stuff like that. I mean, personally speaking, yes, I from a personal standpoint, I would say that having such a certification definitely helps, but I think you need to know, the reason for doing it. I think that's first and foremost. Does having a degree, does having an MBA, does having a PMP, any of these types of degrees, does it assure you a job? The realistic answer is no, right? Does it help? Yeah, it helps. It helps diversify yourself and adds to your resume and stuff like that, but it doesn't necessarily guarantee you a job. So there has to be another reason why you're doing the certification. Maybe it's because the specific job that you're going to be interested in says you need to have a PMP. Okay, that's a great reason. For me, why did I do an MBA? It wasn't because I felt and truly, thought that an MBA is going to be giving me a higher salary and a better job. Those are perks and those are benefits of doing the degree, absolutely. But I did it for my own personal sort of satisfaction, right? I truly wanted to be immersed in the student lifestyle again. I wanted to have the experience. I wanted to be able to network with different people. I wanted to have access to the Career Development Center. I wanted all these different things that sort of led to the MBA experience. And it's a similar sort of fashion with the PMP. I mean, they have their own, associations and all this kind of stuff that and resources that they can give. So maybe those are things that you want to have access to as well, which is another reason for doing the PMP. So I guess, at the end of the day, my answer is, yeah, it definitely helps, but you should know exactly why you're doing it rather than just doing it for the sake of doing it, right?
A big ditto. I've got lots of stuff on my LinkedIn and on my wall. Looks really good. Can't do it anymore because I haven't practiced it for 10 years. So that's the other thing. When you start getting your credentials, you need to be in that field. Otherwise, you're going to lose that information. And then you use that credential 10 years later, and the world has gone on, and you're still back where you were. So just repeating what everybody said, think about why, think about the cost, the time, the life balance that it's going to require, and how it's really going to help you. And it may not just be having the credential, it may be through the network, it may be because it's required, my other skills that you're going to learn, but just higher education and continuing education is fantastic. If anything, it'll keep Alzheimer's away when you're older, right? But at this younger part of your career, how much effort and how much time can you put into that? So everything that everybody said, I think, is very wise.
We have time for one more question. Okay?
Yeah, thank you. My question is regarding the balance, or you can say that comparison between entrepreneurship and getting a job. Because one day you are doing job and you get to think about starting your own business, and the other day the recruiter calls you and you change your mind with the offer they are offering you, right? So how you deal with this kind of situation? And the other is like if you have a freelancing background and entrepreneurship background, and you start a new job to get into the market industry and to get knowledge that what's going in the current trends on the market. So, and you wanted to start your own business, like it's holding you back, something is holding you back. Even if you're an entrepreneur, you're serving and you're serving your clients like as per their instructions. So what's the difference between that entrepreneurship and your own business? That if you're doing contracts for the clients, because your clients say to do, for example, they say turn right, you gotta turn right. And what's the difference between that entrepreneurship and the own business, owning a business or product?
So what's the difference between having your own business?
On business, like service-based business and the product-based business.
Okay, and a project-based.
Okay, the one big issue, and I've explored, going on my own and doing this, is number one, you have a team you're with that you don't have to hire. You can hire them, but you're within the group hiring. You don't have the risk of not being paid, which is a real problem in some cases. And you're not putting your own net worth at risk. I mean, these are things you think about, especially when you have family and things like that. You can be a risk taker, but I'm a risk taker for other people. I don't like taking a lot of risks myself. And that's the joy of doing consulting or project management jobs, is they're different. You deal with people. You really immerse yourself as if it was your own business. But at the end of the day, you got other people to share the profit or the loss with.